What if the helpless old man everyone brushed past tonight was the one person in this hospital you should never, ever disrespect? That question hung in the air the moment he stepped through the ER doors. Thin coat, trembling hands, eyes that didn't beg. The waiting room buzzed with coughing, phone calls, and impatience. He moved slower than the others, pausing as if each breath had a cost. A young triage nurse glanced up, saw the gray hair and hunched shoulders, and her face tightened with annoyance. "Name?" she asked, not looking at him, already tapping her screen like he was wasting her time. He answered softly. Too softly. She sighed, louder than necessary. "Speak up. We're not a retirement home." A couple of people snickered. The old man didn't snap back. He simply repeated his name and held out his ID with fingers that shook, not from fear, but from something controlled. The nurse scanned it and frowned. The system lagged, then flashed a prompt she'd never seen. She clicked it away fast. "Sit. Someone will call you," she said, pointing to a plastic chair near the vending machines. Minutes dragged. His breathing grew shallow. Pain tightened around his mouth, but he kept it locked down, like a man trained to hide weakness. A doctor walked past, glanced once, and kept going. Another nurse muttered, "They come in for attention." And still, nobody moved. Then the first warning sign appeared, small, almost invisible. His sleeve slipped up as he steadied himself on the A chair, just long enough to reveal a faded mark near his wrist, half hidden under age spots. Not random ink. Something deliberate. Something official. A woman across the aisle saw it and went still, unsure why her stomach suddenly tightened. At the triage desk, the screen pinged again. A notification. Not insurance. Not labs. A short line of text blocked by a code the nurse didn't recognize. She rolled her eyes and dismissed it, telling herself it was a glitch. But the ER doesn't glitch like that without a reason. The old man shifted, pressing a hand to his ribs, jaw clenched. He looked toward the hallway where doctors moved like they owned the place. He didn't plead. He didn't raise his voice. He just watched, calm, steady, almost counting time. Because he knew something none of them did. And in a few minutes, when the wrong person finally decided to deal with him, the entire hospital would learn a brutal lesson about honor, hierarchy, and what happens when you judge a veteran by the way he looks. The story pauses here for a reason, because moments like this only matter if you're really paying attention. If you're starting to sense that this isn't just about an old man in an ER, but about respect, hidden strength, and how quickly society judges without knowing the truth, then you're exactly where you need to be. Take a second and let it sink in. Ask yourself, how many times have we all overlooked someone just because they didn't look important? That's why your voice matters here. Drop a comment sharing what you think is really going on behind this man's silence, or if you've ever witnessed something similar in real life. Reading and understanding stories like this changes how we see people. If this is hitting you emotionally, show it. Leave a like so this message reaches more people who need to hear it, and make sure you're subscribed, because stories about justice, honor, and long overdue respect don't end with just one chapter. They finally called him, only not with urgency, not with care. A young orderly stepped into the waiting room, scanned the crowd like he was searching for a lost package, and said the old man's name with a bored tone that made it sound optional. The man stood slowly, one hand on the armrest, the other pressed against his side. His knees wobbled for half a second, and a few people watched like it was a show. At the triage station, the nurse didn't even pretend to soften. "So what is it this time?" she asked, loud, enough for the nearest chairs to hear. "Chest pain? Or are we doing the I feel funny thing?" His voice stayed steady. "Pain. Here. Breathing is getting harder." She tapped the keyboard, barely listening. "How long?" "Since earlier today." "Pain level?" He hesitated, not because he didn't know, but because he'd been trained his whole life to measure pain differently. Severe. She rolled her eyes. Everyone's severe. Blood pressure, pulse, temp. Her cuff tightened on his arm. The machine beeped. Once, then again, like it didn't like what it saw. She frowned and adjusted it, irritated. Hold still. You're making it error. He wasn't making it error. The reading popped up. Her expression flickered. Just a crack of concern. But she smoothed it away instantly, like concern would admit she'd judged him wrong. Probably anxiety, she said, almost to the room, almost as a performance. Older patients panic. It spikes everything. A resident doctor walked by, glanced at the screen, and didn't stop. The nurse leaned in and lowered her voice in that fake professional way that still cuts. Listen, sir, we have real emergencies. If you can stand here and talk, you're not dying. The old man didn't argue. He simply nodded and let them put a flimsy plastic band on his wrist like it was a label on a bag. Then came the real mistake, the one that would nearly cost him everything. She clicked the wrong triage category, not urgent, not critical. She marked him as routine, the kind of box that buries you under hours of waiting while staff chase louder problems. He was sent back to the chairs. As he turned, his hand slipped against the counter. His sleeve lifted again. That faded mark near his wrist showed more clearly. Lines, symbols, precise geometry, not a casual tattoo. The nurse saw it this time. Her eyes narrowed. For a split second, something like recognition tried to form. Then she scoffed. "What is that, some biker thing?" she muttered, dismissing him again. He sat down, and the room swallowed him. 10 minutes later, his breathing changed, shorter, tighter. He swallowed hard, fighting for air, but his face stayed controlled. A man across from him whispered to his wife, "He's gonna pass out." The wife stood, walked to the desk, and said, "He doesn't look okay. Please." The nurse didn't even look up. "He's in line." Then the old man's fingers went numb. He flexed them slowly, like he was checking a system. His eyes tracked the clock above the doors with the calm of someone timing an operation. And when he finally reached into his coat pocket, it wasn't for a phone or a pill bottle. It was for something small, worn, and metal, something he didn't show anyone yet. Across the hall, the triage computer pinged again. This time, it wasn't a simple alert. It forced a notification onto the screen, and for the first time, the nurse couldn't click it away without entering credentials she didn't have. She tried twice. Failed. A second later, the monitor at the nurse's station flashed a single word that made her stomach drop. Flagged. She looked up at the old man, really looked at him, and for the first time that night, she felt a cold question crawl into her mind. Who did we just ignore? The nurse stared at the screen longer than she meant to. The word flagged wasn't supposed to appear during routine triage. It belonged to secure cases, protected identities, patients whose records carried weight far beyond medical charts. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, suddenly unsure. She glanced back at the old man, expecting to see confusion, panic, anything that matched the dismissive picture she'd built of him. Instead, he was calm. Too calm. He sat upright now, shoulders squared despite the pain, breathing measured like someone following a drilled rhythm. His eyes weren't darting around the room anymore. They were fixed on the hallway doors, focused, patient, as if he knew exactly what was coming next and was simply waiting for the timing to be right. A junior nurse leaned over. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," the triage nurse snapped, minimizing the screen. "Probably a system bug." But it didn't feel like a bug. The woman who had spoken up earlier watched the old man closely. Something about him felt deliberate. When a gurney rushed past with alarms blaring, everyone flinched, except him. He didn't even blink. He adjusted his coat instead, revealing that metal object in his hand for just a moment before closing his fist around it again. It wasn't random. It wasn't decorative. It was a military challenge coin, old, heavy, edges worn smooth by decades of being carried. The emblem stamped into it was unmistakable to anyone who'd ever served. A unit insignia long retired, elite, rare. The woman's breath caught. Her father had served. She'd seen one like that once, locked away in a drawer, only taken out on certain days. This wasn't something you bought online. At the desk, the triage system pinged again. This time it didn't just flag, it restricted. Parts of the old man's record were blacked out, replaced with coded placeholders. No insurance details, no standard history. Just a short note buried deep in the file. Do not delay. Contact authorized liaison. The nurse's mouth went dry. She stood and walked toward him, slower now, cautious. Sir, can I see your wrist again? He looked up at her, eyes sharp despite his age. Why? She hesitated. Hospital protocol. For a second, he studied her face like he was assessing sincerity. Then, without a word, he rolled his sleeve back fully. The mark was clearer now, not ink, not decoration. A scar layered over another scar. Surgical. Purposeful. The kind that comes from places hospitals don't talk about. Her confidence cracked. Before she could say anything else, the ER doors slid open again. Not with urgency, but with authority. Two men in dark jackets stepped inside, scanning the room with practiced precision. They didn't look lost. They looked like they were exactly where they were supposed to be. One of them spotted the old man immediately. The nurse felt the air shift, like pressure before a storm. Conversations died down, phones lowered. Even the monitors seemed louder in the sudden quiet. And as the man in the jacket reached for his earpiece and spoke a name, the old man's name, the nurse realized the truth was no longer hidden. It was walking straight toward them. The two men in dark jackets didn't rush in. That alone was unsettling. They moved. With controlled steps, scanning corners, exits, people. Like this wasn't a hospital, but a space that needed to be secured. Still, the staff didn't know who they were, and in places like this, ignorance often turns into arrogance. A senior nurse intercepted them before they reached the waiting area. This is a restricted zone, she said sharply. If you're family, you'll need to wait like everyone else. One of the men gave a polite, tight smile. We're here for a patient. She crossed her arms. Then you can wait. We're overwhelmed and we don't have time for... Her eyes flicked to the old man. Special treatment. That was the wrong phrase. The old man heard it. He exhaled slowly through his nose, pain tightening his chest, but his posture didn't collapse. He had endured worse than dismissive words, much worse. Still, his vision blurred for a second, and he gripped the chair harder, grounding himself. At the desk, the triage nurse felt pressure mounting. The flagged record. The restricted file. The men who clearly weren't ordinary visitors. Instead of stopping to reassess, she did what institutions often do when cornered. She tried to make the problem disappear. He's been disruptive, she said loudly, pointing at the old man. Refusing to cooperate. We may need security to escort him out or transfer him elsewhere. The room froze. Escort him out? The woman who had spoken up earlier blurted. He can barely breathe. Ma'am, please sit down, the nurse snapped. You're not medical staff. A doctor finally approached, irritation written all over his face. What's going on here? Routine patient, the nurse said quickly. Non-critical, but he's drawing attention. The doctor glanced at the old man, barely a second. We don't have beds. Call transport. Send him to county. County hospital. Overcrowded. Understaffed. A place where delays were normal, and sometimes fatal. The old man closed his eyes for a moment, not in defeat, in calculation. He knew what that transfer meant. He also knew that once paperwork started moving, stopping it would take authority, real authority. One of the men in dark jackets took a step forward. "You're making a mistake," the doctor scoffed. "And you are?" "Someone trying to prevent you from compounding it." That was enough. The doctor straightened. "Security," he called out. "We've got interference." As security approached, the atmosphere thickened. People sensed it, the way animals sense an incoming storm. The old man opened his eyes again, gaze steady. He reached into his coat once more, fingers brushing that metal coin, not to show it yet, but to feel it. At that exact moment, the triage computer emitted a sharp, unmistakable tone, louder than before, persistent. The screen locked entirely, flashing a message that made the nurse's blood run cold. "Transfer prohibited. Stand by for direct override." The nurse swallowed hard. The doctor leaned over the desk. "What is that?" Before anyone could answer, the ER doors slid open again. This time, the silence wasn't confusion. It was anticipation. The ER doors didn't burst open. They parted smoothly, deliberately, like someone on the other side knew they would be obeyed. A man in a pressed uniform stepped inside. Not hospital staff, not security. Military. His posture alone shifted the gravity of the room. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the guards slowed, unsure whether to continue forward or step aside. The triage nurse felt her pulse spike. This wasn't part of any drill she knew. The uniformed man didn't scan the room randomly. His eyes went straight to the old man sitting near the vending machines. He stopped a few feet away and didn't speak at first. He simply stood at attention. That single gesture sent a ripple through the ER. The doctor frowned. "Sir, this is a medical facility. If you're—" The man turned his head slightly, just enough to acknowledge him. "Doctor," he said calmly, "you are currently delaying care for a protected individual." Protected. The word landed hard. The old man looked up then, meeting the soldier's eyes. For the first time that night, a faint change crossed his face. Not relief, not pride, but recognition. A shared understanding that required no explanation. "I told them I was fine to wait," the old man said quietly. "With respect, sir," the uniformed man replied, voice steady but firm, "you were never meant to wait." The triage desk computer unlocked on its own. Lines of text began, populating the screen, dates, designations, unit codes that meant nothing to the civilians watching, but everything to the man in uniform. He stepped closer to the desk and placed an official folder down, its seal unmistakable. "This patient," he said, tapping the folder once, "served 32 years, multiple theaters, classified operations, medals awarded, records sealed. His medical status is tied to a federal continuity protocol." The nurse's knees felt weak. The doctor's tone shifted. Instantly. I wasn't informed." "You were notified," the man replied. "You dismissed it." The old man began to cough, sharp and dry. Immediately, the uniformed man turned, signaling. Within seconds, a gurney appeared. This time rushed, this time careful. Oxygen, monitors, real urgency. As they helped him up, the old man finally opened his hand. The challenge coin rested in his palm, dull from age but heavy with meaning. The insignia caught the light, and a few veterans in the room, older men, quiet until now, went pale as recognition hit. Whispers spread, respect followed. The nurse stood frozen, heat creeping up her neck. She couldn't meet his eyes as he was wheeled past her. He didn't glare, he didn't scold. He simply looked at her with something far worse than anger, disappointment, and that was when everyone realized the truth. This wasn't just a mistake. It was a reckoning in progress. The ER no longer felt like a hospital. It felt like a command post that had just received new leadership. The uniformed officer walked alongside the gurney as it moved, his presence carving a clear path through the crowd. Doctors stepped aside. Nurses stopped talking. Security guards, moments ago ready to escort the old man out, now stood rigid, unsure where to put their hands. Another set of doors opened, this time with purpose. 2 more military personnel entered, followed by a senior officer whose rank was unmistakable even to civilians. His insignia carried weight, real weight. The eye, kind that doesn't need to raise its voice. He stopped in the center of the ER, surveyed the scene, and spoke with calm authority. Who authorized the delay? No one answered. The doctor who had ordered the transfer cleared his throat. There was a misunderstanding. The senior officer raised a hand. Silence snapped into place. There was a failure, he corrected. A failure of protocol, judgment, and respect. He turned to the gurney. Sir, he said, addressing the old man directly. On behalf of the command, I apologize. That sentence alone shattered the room. An apology, from a man of that rank, to someone everyone else had treated as disposable. The power shift was absolute. The old man nodded slightly, eyes tired but sharp. Let's focus on the medical issue, he said. That's why I came. Immediate action followed. Orders were given, not requests. A trauma bay was cleared. A specialist was called in from home. The monitors were rechecked, this time without skepticism. The same nurse who had mocked him earlier now hovered near the wall, face drained of color, watching her authority dissolve in real time. The senior officer turned back to the staff. This individual's service record is sealed for a reason, but understand this. His silence was never weakness. It was discipline. The words cut deeper than shouting ever could. As the gurney rolled toward the trauma bay, the old man's eyes met those of the triage nurse one last time. She opened her mouth, maybe to apologize, maybe to explain. He didn't stop her. He didn't invite it either. He looked forward again, choosing dignity over revenge. Behind him, the ER remained frozen in a heavy, humiliating quiet. Every laugh from earlier echoed back now. Every dismissive glance replayed in sharper detail. The hierarchy they thought they understood had collapsed in seconds, and everyone felt it. Because when true authority enters the room, it doesn't announce itself. It exposes everything that came before it. The trauma bay doors closed, but the impact of what had just happened lingered in the ER like thick smoke. No one spoke. The usual rhythm of machines, footsteps, and chatter felt out of place now, almost disrespectful. People avoided eye contact, each lost in their own uncomfortable thoughts. The senior officer didn't leave. He stood near the nurse's station, hands calmly clasped behind his back, waiting. Not rushing, not threatening. That patience was heavier than anger. One by one, the staff realized this moment wasn't over. It was only changing shape. The triage nurse felt it first. The weight in her chest had nothing to do with stress anymore. It was shame. She replayed her words, her tone, the way she had laughed, the way she had clicked routine without listening. For the first time in her career, her authority felt fragile. The senior officer finally spoke again. This facility will file a full incident report. Every decision, every delay, every name. His voice was even, almost gentle. This is not punishment, this is accountability. The doctor swallowed hard. We followed procedure. No, the officer replied. You followed assumptions. That single word landed harder than any reprimand. Assumptions. About age, about appearance, about value. Around them, patients and families who had witnessed everything felt something shift inside themselves too. Anger softened into validation. That quiet satisfaction people feel when injustice doesn't win. When respect is restored not through shouting, but through truth. An older man in the corner, another veteran, stood and gave a small nod toward the officer. Others noticed. The message spread without words. This mattered. Minutes later, an update came from the trauma bay. The old man was stable. Early intervention had made the difference. If they had transferred him, delayed him any longer, the outcome could have been very different. The room exhaled as one. The senior officer nodded once, satisfied. Then he turned to leave. Before exiting, he paused and looked back at the staff. "Remember this," he said quietly. "Real authority doesn't demand respect. It earns it, long before you ever see it." And just like that, he was gone. The ER slowly returned to motion, but it was not the same place it had been an hour earlier. Something invisible had been corrected, a moral balance restored. Those who had mocked now carried the lesson. Those who had doubted now understood. Somewhere behind those closed doors, an old man rested, not as a victim, not as a spectacle, but as what he had always been. A man whose past carried weight, a man who never needed to announce it. If you made it all the way to the end, you're not here for shallow drama. You're here for justice, respect, and the kind of truth that hits hard when the mask finally falls. And that tells me something about you. You understand how dangerous it is to judge a person by what you see on the surface. So here's what I want you to do, right now. First, subscribe to the channel, because these stories aren't just entertainment, they're moral wake-up calls. Every week we bring you emotional storytelling, shocking injustice, and that powerful moment when dignity is finally restored. If you believe veterans deserve respect, if you believe real honor should never be ignored, then you belong here. Second, leave a comment and be specific. Type this exact sentence. "I will never underestimate someone again." I want to see how many people truly understand the lesson behind this story. Third, hit the like button if you felt that shift, the anger, the suspense, and that deep satisfaction when the truth finally forced everyone to swallow their arrogance. That like tells the algorithm this message matters, and it helps this kind of content reach more people who need it. And finally, don't leave yet. Watch the next video that's popping up on your screen right now, because the next story takes this same theme of hidden power and overdue respect and pushes it even further. Go ahead, subscribe, comment, I will never underestimate someone again. Drop that like, and click the next video now.